Sorry, I'm live. So, okay. Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We're learning Chassidus today. We're learning about the Greeks. Tonight is Chanukah, and we have to make sure that we understand what the Chanukah candles are telling us. We have to understand the story, the message. Remember, Chanukah is the last of the Jewish holidays in chronological order, and therefore it's the one that's still currently pending. I know we're fighting a war with Hamas. I know we're fighting a war with the UN. But the Greeks represent another war that's still pending, and that is the war of assimilation. This is the war against faith. And this is a much more sensitive war because the enemy is within. The enemy is within. What's called the doubting Thomas, right?
That's a Christian.
Is that a Christian thing? The Torah demands of us to establish not only an intellectual relationship with our faith, but actually a super rational relationship with our faith. Well, in other words, let me put it. I know it sounds strange, not just an intellectual relationship with faith. What I mean is, says like this: with our Yiddishkeit, our Judaism, our Yiddishkeit is not just a cultural experience. It's not just something which makes sense, but there are parts of Judaism that don't make sense. How is it that we have parts of Judaism that don't make sense? When you study who God is, when you learn Kabbalah and you realize that God is limitless, infinite, in the most wondrous of ways, as we've learned recently about Atzmos, God's essence. That's not even limited in the limitation of being infinite, of being unlimited. God is without limits at all. You realize that God is not limited to intellect. God is not limited to logic. He created the rules of logic. It's like me playing with my 5-year-old a game of cards. I have every right to just change the rules if I want to, or to end the game and just go on and live life in a way where I am the father and no longer the fellow player. In much the same way, God created the laws of logic, and he maybe plays by the rules of logic as long as he's subjecting himself to the laws of nature. What we've learned is the manifestation of Elohim. But God at any moment can interject and change the modality to Havaya, where he can just implement the infinite modality, where God behaves in a way which is irrational, which makes no sense to us. Why? Because God is almighty. God is great. God is infinite. He's unfathomable. And if your God is a God that you can fully grasp intellectually, you need a new God. Well, you're serving an idol. If your God is one that you can put into a box and completely grasp, that's not a God at all. That's just idolatry. True commitment to Hashem means to say that even in the good times as well as in the bad times, when I get you and when I don't get you, I'm committed to you. And this is how we started it all when God offered us the Torah. He offered it to the other nations, and they all said, well, what does it say? We'll want to read the document before we sign on the dotted line. And the Jews said, we don't care what it says. We'll just commit even before we read it. Na'aseh v'nishma is what they said, 2 words. First we will commit, and then we will read what it says. That's what we said at Mount Sinai when we received the Torah. Because our commitment precedes our understanding. Because our understanding is secondary.
Secondary or superficial?
I don't think it's superficial. I think it's secondary. I think it's important. Remember, Chabad means logic because we're trying to rationalize our faith. But our faith is not predicated on our understanding. Our understanding is on the foundation of our faith. It doesn't serve as the foundation of our faith. Right? Foundation is rock solid. It's faith. If the foundation is understanding, is logic, then just like you are persuaded into something, you could be persuaded out of something. Imagine you had a relationship with your wife where you would only do things that make sense. Think about that for a moment.
That wouldn't last long. Then I would live by myself. That would last long.
Right. You'd be a very lonely man, right? Very quickly. Think about that. What kind of relationship would it be if you were committed to your wife only when things make sense? No, I want it this way. Why? Because that's what I want, right? And that's a commitment. That's a marriage. We're called upon, we're challenged in Yiddishkeit to have that kind of relationship with God, and that's what bothered the Greeks. That's what we learned in the last session. What bothered the Greeks is that they were perfectly okay with the Jewish people being a culture, but they were not okay with Judaism being a religion. Let's take a look at this beautiful idea inside the text. We're on page 336, I think it was. Yeah, 336. And now, the way we're describing it right now in the Maimer is that the focal point, the main character of the Chanukah story is actually the oil. Why is it that the oil is the central theme of the Chanukah story? It's not the war, it's not the victory, it's the oil. The Greeks were trying to attack the oil, and the miracle was that the oil was found, pure oil was found, and then that the oil lasted for 8 days. So why is it that the oil is the focal point of the Chanukah story? The reason is because oil represents that which is irrational. The oil represents that which rises to the top. Okay, let's take a look. And one more point that we already mentioned that I want to just drive in. The oil that the Greeks were trying to seize was the oil that was pure, that was holy, that is irrational. It's irrational for oil to be holy, to say this oil is holy oil, but that oil is regular oil. That doesn't make any sense to the Greeks. They were not okay with that. But the Jews said, no, we found holy oil, and we're going to make new holy oil, and the holy oil lasted for 8 days. That's where the battle was. This was the ground zero of the battle of the Chanukah story, which is why it's so incredibly personal to us. Because how often does it happen in our own families tonight as we light the menorah? How many of our family members are going to say, why do we have to do that?
When can we get to the presents?
Right. When can we get to the presents? The presents make sense to me, but candles, who cares about candles? What have candles got to do with anything? It's ridiculous. It doesn't mean anything to me.
What do the presents have to do?
The Goyish, because the presents feel like the Gentiles. It feels like Xmas.
Yeah. So do you do presents?
Of course we do. We invented presents, okay? They got it from us. I'm serious. I'm serious. You know, we invented presents in December. No. We go all out. Sorry, Bob. Rob. Bob, our philosophy is go big or go home. You don't want to give presents, you give 8 days. All right? And where does this come from? The presents comes from Chanukah Gelt. What's Chanukah Gelt? What does that mean? You're supposed to give Chanukah Gelt. Why are you giving Chanukah Gelt on a holiday which is supposed to be all spiritual? The reason is because we're teaching the children to sanctify the mundane. We're giving them money and we're challenging our kids and saying, how can you use this for a mitzvah? We learned this yesterday, that you're supposed to use the money, give the kids money, take 10% of it and give it to charity. Can you do that? Can you ask your 12-year-old entrepreneurial, budding entrepreneur to take 10% of their Chanukah Gelt and give it to tzedakah? How cool is that? Right? Are you able to ask them, well, what kind of mitzvah can you do with this money? The Greeks were all about physical being used as a self-glorifying purpose, just to glorify the physical. They would wrestle naked in the gymnasiums. They would celebrate the human body, celebrate the human mind, celebrate art, celebrate culture. Remember the word Greek in Hebrew is yavan, which is 3 letters that go increasingly down. They were all about mundane, about this terra firma, this physical earth. They had no interest in God, in the spiritual. When we give Chanukah Gelt, it's about sanctifying the mundane. It's about making a mitzvah out of the ordinary, right? And that is what the purpose of the presents is. It's not about this horrific sense of entitlement, which you see sometimes from children, where they say, that present's not good enough for me. That's not the present that I wanted. I wanted it. Whatever. And you see these kids sometimes that have these these meltdowns, tantrums. This is not about entitlement and about spoiling kids rotten. It's about an education, teaching them how to use every physical object and possession that they have for a higher purpose. That's the origin of the presence, right? Which is a concurrent theme that runs throughout every single aspect of the Chanukah story. Let's read this idea inside the text of the Frierdiker Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, the sixth Chabad Rebbe, the bottom of page 336. When the Greeks conquered Jerusalem, may it be rebuilt speedily in our days. Amen. What does it mean, be rebuilt speedily in our days? Isn't Jerusalem rebuilt already? The Holy Temple, the third temple. And they seized the Holy Temple. They seized the second temple, by the way. They defiled all the oil they found in there. When the Hashmoneans, with God's help, vanquished the Greeks, they found that all of the flasks prepared for use in the menorah, only one still retained the high priest's seal. How did they know they found this one like it was buried mostly under the ground? It had like just a little bit sticking out of the ground, so they realized that it wasn't touched by the Greeks because of the seal, but also because they figured that the Greeks didn't encounter this one. As the Tosfos explains, this one flask was buried in the ground, proof that it had not been handled by the Greeks. By the way, what was the name of the Hashmoneans? The Hashmoneans is the name of the family; it's their last name. But what did they call their little army? Maccabees. What's Maccabees? What does Maccabee mean? Hammer? No. Maccabees is an acronym for a verse in Torah which comes from Az Yashir Moshe. We say it every single morning in our prayers. It's the Song of the Sea. At the Song of the Sea, what the Jewish people said, Mi kamocha ba'ilim adoshem. Mi kamocha ba'ilim adoshem, which means, who is great like you in the heavens, O God? Oh, you're good. How do you sing it? Okay, good. No problem. Good. So who is great like you in the heavens, O God? Why did they use this term, Maccabee, which is the acronym for who is great like you in the heavens, O God? Because the whole war was about God. They said, we are God's warriors. That's who we are, right? They were representing the victim here who was trying to be stamped out, snuffed out, destroyed. They were representing God, right? In this one remaining flask, there was only enough oil for one day, but God caused it to burn in the menorah for 8 days, long enough to produce new oil. It takes 8 days to make new oil. Because of this great miracle, the 8 days, beginning the 25th of Kislev, were established. That's tonight and tomorrow, as festive days to be marked by the recitation of Hallel and paeans of praise to God. What is the significance of the oil burning for 8 days? Why is 8 godly?
7 is natural.
7 is the cycle of nature. 7 is the cycle of nature. 7 colors of the rainbow. 7 notes of music. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. 7 physical properties of every physical object. Where did the 7 days of the week come from? I'm curious to know who invented the 7 days of the week.
The same person who created the calendar with Sunday is the first day of the week.
Who was that? Who created the calendar with Sunday the first day?
Jew.
Me?
A Jew.
A Jew. I don't agree with you that the first person who made Sunday the first day of the week invented the week. That was not the earliest. The Gregorian calendar is not the origin of the 7-day week. It is the very act of creation.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Well, God didn't make Sunday the first day of the week. Oh, he did. Sorry. So God did. So you said person, you threw me off. I'm sorry. God. So when we celebrate a week, I just want you to know that week, W-E-E-K, it's a manifestation of the 7 days of creation. It's an act of faith.
So we have the seven of the 8 candles are that miracle.
Just 1 second before I get there. Yeah, 1 second. So I just want you to realize that the 7-day week is a religious act because it commemorates the 7 days in which God created the world. Let me ask another question. Who invented marriage? Who would come up with this idea? Can you imagine if a bunch of humans saying, I think we should take 2 diametrically opposed people that have absolutely nothing in common and have them share a bank account and a life for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, but that's contrary to what you said. Yeah, you're just meeting up with the other half of your soul.
That's what I'm saying. Marriage is a religious experience. It's not man-made. It's not a man-made idea, which is why marriages that leave God out of the marriage have a overwhelming divorce rate. Much, much more than 50%, which is very, very interesting. Marriage is a godly mechanism. Anyways, back here. So 7 days represents the act of creation. The number 8 is one above 7, which represents number 8. 7 represents the cycle of creation of this world of nature. The number 8 is one above 7, which is supernatural. It's above natural. It's miraculous, which is why anytime we make a covenant or a representation of God, we use the number 8. How do you make a covenant with God? It's on the 8th day of a baby boy's life. When we have a miracle, it typically lasts for 8 days, like 8 days of Chanukah and 8 days of Sukkot, divine protection, and 8 days of Passover, right? When we have the mathematical representation of infinity, it is the number 8, right? You know that, Chuck? Number 8. That's how you draw infinity. You draw like a little 8 on its side. Yeah. So the number 8 represents infinity because, again, what were the Greeks trying to fight against? They said this world is a world of definition, of culture, of human achievement. There is no such thing as an infinite God.
Yeah. Because it's 2 zeros on top of each other. 0 is infinity.
I don't know.
Circles.
I don't know about that. I don't know.
Circles.
0 is infinity. That's interesting. I never thought of 0 as infinity. I don't know. I gotta think about that. But what I'm saying is that the what was I saying?
8.
8.
Candle is 8. The super rational.
No, because the Greeks were fighting against an infinite God. The Greeks were they didn't believe in an infinite God, and that's why the observance of the miracle of Chanukah manifested in the number 8. Now I want you to realize Chanukah is different to Passover and Sukkot and Shavuos. And Shavuos, God comes out of heaven, riding high, the earth-shattering revelation. God is revealing himself on Mount Sinai. This is an awesome event, right? I mean, the people's souls expired. This was like an unbelievable event happening at Mount Sinai. Passover was another epic thriller where, God is doing these 10 miraculous interventions, frogs coming out of everywhere, rivers turning to blood, death of the firstborn. I mean, this was like really miraculous stuff. And of course, Sukkot, we were surviving 40 years in this awesome air-conditioned chamber in the desert. I mean, that was pretty miraculous too. But Hanukkah, we were already living in times of exile. We were already exiled from into Babylon. Yeah, it's post-biblical. The Torah, the Jews were already. The first temple was destroyed by the Babylonians. We already had spent all that time with Darius and Cyrus and Achashverosh, and the whole Purim story already happened. We were living in like modern times, relatively speaking. You didn't have these open miracles going on. Yet, the only miracle of the Hanukkah story was a very, very shashtil kind of miracle. It was a candle that was burning for 8 days in the Holy Temple. It wasn't even like on camera. It wasn't on Facebook Live, like people watching it. It was just like in the camera. What?
You had to be there.
You had to be there, yeah. This wasn't even... this wasn't even like an overt. It was a covert miracle. It was behind the scenes, which was like another quiet miracle, like the burning bush, when Moses meets God for the first time, right? Where the bush is burning, but it wasn't burning, because the purpose of the Hanukkah story was to inspire us to realize that God is hidden through our efforts. We were waging the war. We had the courage to mobilize a tiny army against the mighty Greek Empire.
So isn't that a miracle as well?
We had the courage to stand up for what we believe in, even though the overwhelming majority of Jews were assimilated. I want you to think about that for a moment. How many Jews today were in Palm Beach Gardens shul? Vis-a-vis the ones that weren't in shul today. How many Jews in Palm Beach Gardens were not in shul
An
today?
infinitely small number.
Not infinite. It's not infinite. Not infinite. We're probably at number 99 to 1. Right?
99
For every Jew that was in shul today.
9,999.
No, it's not that many Jews in Palm Beach Gardens. But think about it. If we had 25 men in shul today, think about it.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Whatever. Maybe we outnumbered. Let's call it 99 to 1. So you could easily come out and say, Judaism is over. There's no hope. There's no hope. There's no future for Judaism. You could say it's done. It's hopeless. There's no path to to the future of Judaism. But these guys, they came in with their efforts and they said, look, we don't care what everybody else is doing. We know what we need to do. And we're going to plow on forward with courage and with fortitude, right? And when they did that effort, Hashem blessed them with astronomical success beyond their wildest dreams and expectations. They vanquished the Greek army. They drove the Greeks out of the Holy Land. And they managed to rededicate the temple. This is stuff that they didn't occur to them, right? What that means is, and God, your God, will bless you in all that you do. Critical here, this verse from Torah, is that you need to do, and then God blesses your actions. But you can't just sit there and say, God, I'm going to take a nap, and I expect you to win the war by the time I'm awake. That would be an Egyptian kind of miracle, right? That would be a Shavuos kind of miracle. In modern times, the way that we experience miracles is hidden miracles. It's a Chanukah miracle, where the little burning candle over there reminds you that, God is with us. It's a ner tamid, the candle's burning. It reminds us God is with us, but you just keep on fighting. I'm blessing your actions. We have our own burning candle that is burning against all odds today. A little bit behind the scenes. It's off the beaten track. You have to really be there to understand it, to recognize the burning candle. And that's a candle that burned not for 8 days, but for 75 years. Think about it. There's a candle that's still burning for 75 years. Still there. I mean, why is October 7th not happening more often? Think about it. Just think about that for a moment. We're surrounded by such vicious enemies, and so many of them. How is it that we're still around? I say the candle's still burning. Not for 8 days, but for 75 years. What?
And we all assume that we're done.
Right.
That we're history.
Yeah. And I think the message here is that we have to be inspired from Chanukah to realize that God is hiding in the wings. He wants us to be in the front and the center stage. He says, look, I'm supporting you, but just believe in yourself.
Constant blend of
Believe that I'm right behind you. I'm not going to come out and rescue you. Like, you're not in diapers. You don't need me to mommy you around. You're big kids now. You're all grown up. Make your own choices. I'll bless your actions. That's what Chanukah is. In the beginning of our nation's development, in our nation's infancy, we needed God to reveal amazing miracles to give us confidence. But as we matured with time, God says, okay, learn the lessons of your past. I'm here, hineni. But no, you're up to bat. Hit the ball and you'll see. Oh, God of the stadium, but just hit it.
Miracles. Miracles.
They're hidden miracles. They're Chanukah miracles.
Soviet Jewry
That's right. Look at the Soviet Jewry movement.
6-Day War.
In the early 80s, when we had Andropov and we had Chernenko, that within 6, 7, 8 years, when Gorbachev came in, Reagan put his fist down, that 2 million Jews would leave the Soviet Union.
Is that not a miracle in our times?
Total miracle.
It's unthinkable. When you study the Soviet Jewry movement, we're actually having a speaker coming, a good friend of Harvey's coming here in May, I think it is, Pamela Braun Cohen. She was one of the leaders, a Jewish housewife who became a leader of the Jewish Soviet freedom movement. It's an unbelievable story of miracles in our times, but you have to be able to see and say, oh, that candle is burning. You got to be able to notice it, because it's easy to dismiss it and say, well, yeah, I guess it's okay for Soviet Jewry to survive 80 years of intense persecution and still to be able to be freed, from the biggest outdoor prison, to borrow a modern term. The 6-Day War, look at the miracles. They're miracles, but they're understated. This is our Chanukah miracle. And I wanted just to point out to you, it wasn't that God was was out there in the open, up front and center, and everybody was like, hallelujah, I believe. No, it wasn't. Most of the Jews were assimilated. That's the kind of setting that Chanukah was yesterday, was 2,187 years ago, was just yesterday. And it was in this setting that God blesses us. And that's why Chanukah is still pending, because it's difficult. It's easy to dismiss the divine. It's easy to dismiss the infinite when you can't see it. But Chanukah reminds us to see the light with our hearts, when all our eyes see is darkness. All right, let's just finish this piece. The battle of the Greeks is more spiritual than physical. It was unlike wars fought for material ends, such as land, slaves, or plunder. The Greeks were highly cultured and regarded the Torah as a remarkable body of writing. They also held the Jews in high esteem for possessing an intellectual capacity to comprehend such a profound work. I hope people didn't feel that way about the World of Kabbalah seminar, where they were like, I'm glad my rabbi knows what he's talking about, but I don't know what he's talking about.
It was, you know what, it was really, if you took it individually, it might have been overwhelmed, but when you look at it as a 6-week, it was fabulous.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm glad to hear that. I'm so relieved to hear that, because, the Torah is like an ocean. It's like an ocean. It's deeper than deep. It's wider than wide. It's longer than long. And you try to present. We don't want to dumb it down and say, here's the ocean, a cup of water. We want to give you, come, let's go swimming, let's go diving, But that could be overwhelming to people, right? So, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Rob. Thank you.
My wife sits at a dinner table and explains Kabbalah to people. That's a miracle.
That is a miracle too.
That is a miracle too.
Maybe that's the sweetest sound of all, right? Okay, the Greeks even admired many of the mitzvahs which the Jews observed. So the Greeks are happy with the Jews. Nonetheless, they were tremendous heretics. What does it mean, a tremendous heretic? They did not have any space or tolerance for God, denying the existence of God and the sanctity of Torah mitzvahs. They were okay with Torah as an intellectual book which you can throw on the floor. They were okay with mitzvahs being observed as a culture that's not holy. Don't kiss the mezuzah. You want to put a mezuzah on your door because it's a Jewish thing, go for it. But don't kiss it. Who kisses his doorpost? Seriously. This is crazy, right? Who kisses a book? Who dances with a book? It's unbelievable. The Medrash states, a dead body rationally does not defile. Neither does water, like of a mikveh, logically purify. It makes no sense that you touch a dead body, walk into a cemetery, you're impure. You dip into the water of the mikveh, now you're pure. It makes no sense. However, God says, I have so decreed and I have so established. You are not permitted to transgress my decrees. There is no logical reason why a mikveh purifies. It is a divine decree. And so Jews may not act otherwise. Why? Because God said so. Greeks were not happy with that. For the Torah is not only profoundly intelligent to man, but it represents God's intellect and will. God's intellect, which is way beyond our intellect. When we learn about the 10 sephiros, the 10 attributes of understanding and emotion, we realize that for God, wisdom is like the bottom of his heel. I mean, to use an anthropomorphic example. Wisdom is like, is nothing for God, right? But just because you can't expect your understanding to match God's understanding, right? And it says clearly in the prophecy, for my thoughts are not your thoughts. You don't get me. And then you got divine will. Divine will. Yeah, that's what I don't even get my wife, right? I'm not even trying to understand God's will, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, what hope do we have of understanding God's will, right? Yeah, and I'm okay with it. I'm like, you know what? Just roll with the punches, go with the flow. Yes, dear, and be a happy wife, happy life, right? Which transcends human comprehension. And this is we're really getting to the ground zero here of understanding what the Chanukah story is all about. So let's just wrap this up. We're only halfway through the discourse, but let's just wrap it up by saying Chanukah is such an exciting, relevant, modern Jewish holiday. In the sense that, it's a little bit difficult to relate to Passover when you think about when was the last time that, frogs or blood.
Plague of frogs.
Yeah,
When
like
was the last time we
you
saw
know,
a plague?
I don't do frogs that well, you
We've seen
know.
plague.
I can't.
We've seen plague.
You know, it's hard for me to relate to the miracles of the splitting of the Red Sea.
Yeah, right.
When do we see open miracles like the splitting of the Red Sea? Hanukkah represents the hidden hand of God, which is exactly the world that we're living in right now. Now, when God decides to hide in this epic game of hide and seek, it's very easy to just say, you believe in that stuff, right? You believe in invisible stuff? You're ridiculous, right?
Yeah, but would it kill him to have an open miracle?
Once in a while, you know?
Yeah, I mean,
Just like a
really,
hi there kind of.
divide the sea. Everybody would see it and say, "Holy crap! There must be a God."
Wait a second. Rob wants to win the lottery.
Yeah, right.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So what's this?
Yom
What?
Kippur War.
You got a lot of
War.
believers.
Yeah, the war.
No, but even Harvey,
But
even that
people
Harvey,
explain that
I don't think that's what he
away.
wants, because he would say there was the superiority of the
Right.
IDF, the IAF, you know, the special
This-
weaponry.
This here is in 2 paragraphs is the entire issue and problem with the Jewish people. It's what you said in the Kabbalah class. You know, people have no problem, you know, accepting, okay, there was a higher power, God created the world, but God wrote a book. He wrote the Torah. They don't, it's like most of the people, when I talk to them, they say, I don't get it. I don't get kosher, I don't get the mikvah, I don't get this.
Mazel tov. So what? See what I get?
That's my
That's the
problem.
point.
I don't get my wife. So what? Right?
You say
How
so,
do you get them to come over? They're not,
So
I
you
mean,
need
you're
you
preaching
need
to
an
the choir.
You need an
here.
open miracle for that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but this is the clearest, best explanation that I've ever heard.
Oh,
What is?
From a Chicago
It's two
attorney.
paragraphs.
In these 2 paragraphs, and now I understand why I'm a Jew.
ah,
Zoe,
That's right.
you know what?
I
For this alone, it was worth it,
think
right?
it's time for another
Look,
bris. Come here.
I just want to say,
That's the other thing, that brisket, they big on that.
oh, that's right, that's right.
That was
The
really
Greeks
fun.
were they outlawed the bris. The Greeks outlawed the bris. They had a huge problem with the bris.
That's
They're
right.
like, why would you violate the human body like that?
First one, kosher two.
We're gonna wrestle.
Yeah, they had a huge
But
problem.
how do you get the Jews who they like it, they want it, they like the kiddush, but they say, you know what, I'm not going to do kosher. I don't get it. I'm not going to.
Oh, how do you respond to them?
Not how do you respond? How do you get them to come over?
So I'll tell you what happens. I'll tell you what happens.
Understand that
So the
God
Chabad
said it,
rabbi over
he
here.
did it,
How
There's
do-
no explanation.
How do you explain to them about the 8th day? That's what this is all about.
First of all, you can explain what we've just learned. You can explain this. There is no reason in the world why you cannot explain this. Sit your kids down and say, kids, I want to take this to the next level. Let's have a family Zoom call tonight, and with all the candles, everybody put your candles up. And no, you can't do it tonight because you had the rabbi's at the Chanukah party, but you can do it later.
You know what argument my kids hated more than anything when I would say? When they would say, why? I said, because I said so. That's why. I don't have to give you an explanation. I don't have to rationalize
What do you
it.
think you got?
I'm the parent. That's what they said. What do you think?
I know. That sounds like to me.
So
I wouldn't
to have
listen.
that explanation
I wouldn't listen.
isn't to our friends who deem themselves to be smart and intellectual and philosophical. You're not going to get them to come over. What do you say to them?
So let's do an experiment, folks. I want to challenge you to share this with your family, even if it's one child or one family member, and take note of their responses. And we'll have a session next week where we'll play devil's advocate, and you'll present whatever they said, and we'll try to discuss it. Seriously, I believe that if people are not receptive to an idea, then one of a few things will happen. Either they'll experience a life crisis that will break their ego, right? You know, people, when they lose a loved one or an illness, or they feel vulnerable or something happens, and then they need a rabbi. That's when they're receptive. Another way is, look, this is honestly the test of wealth. When you have the test, it's much harder to experience wealth than it is to experience poverty, because when you're experiencing poverty, you're able to find your faith because you know you need help somewhere. But when you're wealthy, When you're affluent, you're like, I have everything. I don't need God. I don't need anything. It's actually difficult when you have to experience, it's difficult to inspire the uninspirables. But when you do the Hanukkah candles and you experience the ritual and you say, guys, why are we doing this? And I want you to meditate and think this through. Think about what we learned. Think about the message of the Greeks. How can you say this to your family in a way that would be interesting, right? Make your Hanukkah candles into a Passover Seder, right? Where you turn it into a conversation. And guys, you know what the Greeks really wanted? What are we actually celebrating here? Why the oil? Why the oil? And see if you can turn it into a conversation, right? Into an interesting discussion. Manis Friedman has a very interesting analogy. So a man and woman get married, and she, a few days after the wedding, she serves him. She says, "Come home. I'm making a delicious soup. I'm making a delicious soup." So he says, "Fine." He doesn't come home. She's sitting there at the table with the soup. She's sitting there waiting for him to come. She's waiting 3,000 years. She waits 3,000 years. After 3,000 years, he shows up and says, "Honey, I'm home." And then he sits down and tastes the soup. And he says, "Soup's cold. Soup's cold."
I knew that was coming.
How's she gonna react to that? Soup's cold. You're lucky I'm here. You're lucky there's soup. You're lucky there's a house. You're lucky I waited for you for 3,000 years, right? The analogy is, the analog is to God and the Jewish people got married 3,000 years ago. So God is the groom, we're the bride. And we're like, God, this is great. We're married. It's going to be awesome, right? So we say, God, yeah, come around sometime, right? He gave us the revelation of Mount Sinai. We're like, come back soon, See, he hides for 3,000 years. He's hiding, still hiding. You're asking, why do we have a miracle once in a while? He's still hiding. He comes up 3,000 years later. He's like, where's everybody? Hello? What do you mean, where is it? Where were you for the past 3,000 years, right? You want to know why the Jews are like a little off the beaten track right now? You want to know what happened to them? You were AWOL. That's what happened to them, right? In other words, this is a game of hide and seek. This world, this life. Hashem chose to hide. He likes, that's what he wants. He wants us to find him. He wants us to grope through the darkness, to figure our way through, to stumble and fall, but eventually to find our way towards the light.
It's too obvious.
Right. He wants us to find it. But if he poked his head out every once in a while, he's like, hey, I'm hiding here.
It's too easy.
It would be too easy.
It's like a guy who takes his suit to the tailor, to the altar, and tailor gives him a ticket. The guy goes home, puts the ticket in his drawer, completely forgets about it. 5 years later, he's cleaning out his drawer. He finds the ticket from the tailor for a suit. He says, "Oh my God, I completely forgot about this." So 5 years later, he goes back to the tailor and he says, "Here's my ticket." The tailor looks at the ticket and says, "Oh, it'll be ready Thursday."
Okay, I try to tell you.
No matter when you show up, it's
okay. We have
always
a report from Indonesia here. To answer your question, 2 days ago, Rabbi, we Indonesians like to follow trends. I asked him about what anti-Semitism is like in Indonesia. What do they say about the war on terror, Israel's war on terror? So we Indonesians like to follow trends, which is not ideal for following the real God. Okay. FYI, the only Orthodox synagogue is far away from the nation's capital. There's a shul in Indonesia, really? Maybe that's because the Jews of Indonesia don't want to follow trends. That's interesting. Tell us more. You heard about the Chabad in Gaza, guys? Okay. Muslims went to pray on Friday. Jews pray on Shabbos. Christians pray on Sunday. It seems like they wanted to pray on Shabbat, but it was one day early or one day late. Interesting. No, I think they were trying to change it. There was a deliberate modification that, I've spoken about this other times, that the architects of Christianity were trying to move it away from Judaism. The latest time to light the Hanukkah candles before the dawn on weekdays, correct? Is that correct, Rabbi? That is correct. All right, guys, don't forget to light your Hanukkah candles. And happy Hanukkah. Let's make this Hanukkah illuminated. Let's illuminate this Hanukkah, not just with physical light, but more importantly, with spiritual light, illuminating our families and inspiring our own hearts as well.
See y'all tonight.